Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to our panel today. Our panel is titled I've Got a Little List Using Databases, Websites, and Social Media to Move Lesser Known Musicals from the Margins to the Mainstream. And what we're hoping to do today is to share with you some of the lists and databases that people have been making to try and make lesser known musicals more accessible. And we're joined today by several guests, two guests, three guests, four guests. There's four of us, I've just counted. And so what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves and also to talk a little bit about how they use lists and databases in their work and why they started to make this resource. So I'm going to go to you first, Caden, and then we will introduce the two people who are on the screen behind us. So Caden, do you want to start with that question?
Absolutely. And then I hope that we'll get to you as well, because you have your own databases. But my name is Caden Zane Marshall. I am a musical theater performer and sign language interpreter, but I think I'm best known as the musical dealer on TikTok and Instagram. I help people find obscure musicals. I spotlight things that need a little bit more attention because they're hidden gems, because they're doing something really unique. And I've gotten a lot of traction because I make public a whole lot of lists and spreadsheets that I have, such as like the demographics of main characters in musicals. Are they Black? Are they gay? Are they disabled? How many of them we have in the canon compared to white people in the musical theater canon, which is really like much more than 80% of all the stories that we're telling, as well as things like musicals you would love. If you like these in this side of the spreadsheet, then you look at all of the ones to the right of it, and a timeline of musicals, a calendar of musicals, just like because I was curious and because there was information that I was looking for that I couldn't find elsewhere. And so I just make content looking at those, answering people's questions, and finding new albums that drop and spotlighting those.
Excellent. And Caden, could you tell us how we could access your resources?
So I have a website, cadenzane.com. That's cadenzane.com. And that has like 3 pages. It has a page for my performance work, for my ASL interpreter work, and then for my influencer work. And in the influencer work, there's just a whole page of like, here's everything. It's labeled. You can look through it, have fun.
It's absolutely mind-blowing the amount of stuff there. So that's www.cadenzane, Caden Zane, Zane.com.
That's on the
Okay.
World Wide Web.
Yes, you might have heard of it. Excellent. Thank you very much, Caden. I'm going to hand over now to Sydney, if that's okay. Sydney, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. Hi, friends. I'm Sydney. My pronouns are they, them. I am how do I introduce myself? I'm a disability media historian and performer. I currently work more in theater, so I'm more a theater historian than I am other things, but I also do lots of reviews of film and TV and all that kind of stuff. You may have seen me on the interwebs. I have lots of different, I do like 2 reviews a week usually of different disability representation in media. Um, I kind of have several different databases and lists and things that I've created and that I use. The first one is for my undergrad thesis. I made a playlist of videos describing different ways we can change theater and theater education to be more accessible and what universal design in performance can look like, particularly in educational spaces. So that's a thing that I made. I think the primary thing I'll probably end up talking about most today is my access reviews. So I live in New York City. I work in the theater industry in New York City. And anytime I go see a show on Broadway, off Broadway, wherever, I will take notes of all of the major lighting cues and sound cues, and I will put them in a document to be like, hey, here's where the strobe light is in this show, or here is how stroby this one is compared to this one, or like I will compare, this show is the same sensory accessibility of this other show that you may have seen, and that kind of stuff, just to make that available, as well as where the bathrooms are, if they're divided into the gender binary, all of that kind of stuff, so that that information is accessible to folks who may need it, so that they know what shows they're picking. Because I know that a lot of people will just go, I don't know, so I'm not going to see it altogether. And having the information available makes more people go see the theater. Um, And then I also, as a disability theater historian, I make video essays about different specific shows that include disability, either explicitly or implicitly, and what that means for the theater canon, the history of those shows, how we can go about ethically staging them and talking about them. So that has inadvertently become a sort of database of here are shows that involve disability as I'm slowly working through my massive list of those, but those projects take forever. So those are kind of the main things that I do.
Lovely. And Sydney, where can we find your lists?
Oh my goodness. I am on pretty much every social platform at Disabled Autistic Lesbian. Pretty easy to find. My website is also that. But you can also just Google me, and most of the stuff is on YouTube, but it's also my access reviews are on my website and on my Instagram. And yeah, pretty much everything else is YouTube.
So that's at Disabled Autistic Lesbian is where you find Sydney's work there. Let's pass over to Jordan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jordan Sidfield, and I'm a musical theater artist living in New York City. I do a little bit of everything. I'm a performer, singer, songwriter, and I'm also an educator. Right now, I work for New York City Parks in the media education department. I got involved with making lists starting as a passion project. I was often kind of seeked out by peers back in college on what audition materials I would recommend, because I had, similar to Caden, a knowledge of different theater pieces that were sometimes a little bit more obscure. And so one day I was like, oh, this should be just like a centralized resource. And I started just making a list. And that eventually led me to develop a website called auditionsource.org, which started as a Google Sheet. And it's still a Google Sheet technically, but I also added a really cool extension feature that turned it almost into a really nice looking application that I've just embedded on the website. And it's still growing. I got a very generous piece of information from the Hal Leonard organization. They just had a database of all of their singers, musical theater anthology, sheet music series books. And so they were like, here, like, just have it and utilize it in whatever way you see fit. And so I was able to kind of just build on that, adding things like what genre does it cover? What's the voice type? What's the tempo level? Is it a ballad? Is it up tempo? And I've started adding things like keywords and themes, and also what I think is going to be probably the most tangible piece of data that I've added on is the lists of the performers that have played the part. I'm starting with just Broadway and touring productions, but I'm hoping to expand that to regional and even community theater, and just continuing to add as much data to this as possible so that when actors are looking for audition materials, they can put in whatever keywords and everything, and it will spit out a list of everything that's relevant, not only for like what they're auditioning for, but maybe just for their book. And yeah, it's got lots of other resources on there. I'm hoping to include more resources like all of the wonderful, lovely people that you see on the Zoom call, their lists as well, because I think, you know, the more information you have, the better.
Thanks so much for that, Jordan. So that's auditionsource.org.
Yes, .org, because .com was taken, and so I took .org.
Excellent.
It's fine. I feel like .org aligns more with like my kind of vision for it anyway, so it's fine.
It is awkward since I just to introduce the .com website, but thank you, Jordan. Never mind.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
introduce myself and my relevance to this list, this panel here. My name's Dr. James Lovelock. I'm an academic at the moment at Sheffield Hallam University, lecturing in acting and performance. And the list that I have is a website again. It's www.queermusicals.com. And if you've ever been to this conference before, I have blathered on about it for very many times. But what I've tried to do there is to provide a list of musicals that have LGBTQ plus characters, and I've tried to start to categorize them, thinking about the sexuality of the character, the gender of the character, specifically if there are intersections with race and disability and deafness and all of those sorts of things there. And so that is my resource that I'm kind of trying to keep on top of. And that kind of leads me on to our next question, which is, so we've got four very different lists. I mean, there's more than four lists between us here actually, but if we think that Caden has a list of kind of sort of representation in musicals list, among others, Sydney has a list of access, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Accessibility for the musicals that on the list there. Jordan has a list of audition songs. So we've got and I have a list of queer musicals with LGBTQ characters. That's four quite different lists, but also they're lists that you don't necessarily know where to find them. And so our next question that I'm going to ask people to kind of answer is, how can we make the resources that we've got, these lists and other lists that exist as well, how can we make them more publicly available, and how can we promote them more so that people can use them? Perhaps thinking specifically about academics and students, but actually in general as well, how can we kind of make our resources more available and accessible and known about? So does somebody want to start with that? Caden, do you want to start by answering that?
Would love to. This is something that was the major reason that we wanted to have this panel, because we recognize that there is like a gap in information that's accessible within the theater world. I feel like in film and TV, there's a wiki for every single TV show that has ever existed and has all of the details. And there's like, people are constantly making public and easily accessible information about film work and music and different like musicians and artists and that kind of thing. And we, for the most part, started making our lists because we needed that information and we saw that it wasn't there. So we started just collecting it out of necessity. And through, traversing through the social media internet, I've run into a whole lot of people when I post about my list. They're like, oh, I have this list of different musical theater songs that aren't used enough in auditions so that my voice students can bring in something that's unique that makes people perk up their ears. And they'll show me their spreadsheet and it is massive and it is super helpful, and nobody has any way of accessing it, because so far the best way that we've found to get this out into the world is social media. And it's hard to build a platform on social media that brings those resources out to people. And so I didn't know that Jordan was considering adding some of our content and lists onto your website. I really like the idea of like auditionsource.org being like, oh, this is where you find the demographics of main characters so that you know what kinds of shows you can pull monologues from. This is, like, I really enjoyed that idea. I wish that we had some way of making that, or Playbill or Broadway World, become a more usable platform to get those things and to get people to collaborate on them. Do y'all have anything to say about that?
Yeah, let's go to Sydney, if that's okay.
Obviously, this isn't like the most easy answer of sorts. I don't want to just be like, oh, we can just integrate it into the system as it currently exists. But like, the New York City theater landscape has like maybe 13 people max, I swear. Every time I know somebody, they know somebody else. And so like just over the past 2 or so years of making these access reviews, I'm now like know people in the shows so I can text them and say, hey, what was this cue line? And get that to be like more. So there's people who are in the shows who are now aware of these things happening or existing. I will often have people in the shows that I do access reviews for like my post, and I'm like, you're not even following me, you just somehow found it. But that is also like, it's not just the people on the stage, right, who are paying attention to this stuff, it's the people backstage. And I'm starting to have people be like, oh, we want to invite you to make an access review for our show, or oh, we would love a conversation with the creative team about what accessible design looks like so that we can keep that in mind when we're staging our show. And those conversations I'm noticing are starting to become bigger and appearing in larger theater companies as time is going on. And so like I have had a lot of, it's been great with social media, and that in social media, a lot of people are becoming aware of these kinds of things and sharing them with each other, and it's becoming a public resource. But I'm also starting to see it bleed a little bit into the actual creation of shows behind the scenes and thinking about what this can mean on a larger scale, which I think has been really helpful because once you have the institutional support for it, like I can't personally make all of these for the rest of my life. There's going to be a day when I book a national tour and I can't make any access reviews anymore because I'm not going to be in New York City. So it's nice to know that there are conversations being had about how to like mitigate some of the things that I'm warning people about, so that there might come a point one day where I don't even need to make these anymore, which would be great.
That's great to hear, Sydney, that you've got people who are in the theatre community are kind of now connecting and using your work as part of moving forward. That's really great to hear. The other thing I was just going to mention here is we were supposed to have Delaney Piggins with us today from Ring of Keys, and ringofkeys.org is a list of queer female and non-binary creatives, but that includes writers, primarily writers, but also stage managers, directors, choreographers, and it's a huge resource. And one of the things that Ring of Keys has helped is, like Sydney was saying, to get people in who are able to advise on certain aspects. So there are people who would advise on the representation of trans people and non-binary people in musicals, for example, and they can be accessed through ringofkeys.org. But again, this is another separate website. And so again, we come back to the same question of how we can get these resources better known. Jordan, did you have anything that you wanted to put in there?
The only things I'm thinking of just kind of on the fly are, how can we start to communicate with, I suppose, the right groups of people that will also be able to further these resources, accessibility, and just the knowledge that they exist. Absolutely, social media is going to be key. And I'm also thinking groups like American, like worldwide even, like colleges and performing arts, high schools, groups like Theater Communications Group, I know does some resources and like data management. And I'm sure there are other like organizations out there that may also have kind of a vested interest in bringing some of these types of resources out into the public. Because also there's a lot of value that comes, especially from the knowledge on like demographics and accessibility. I think there's a lot of value in that. So those are kind of some of the things that I'm thinking off the top of my head, at least.
I really like that you mentioned colleges because that's where I've gotten contacted the most by professors and colleges being like, we're really having a rough time figuring out how to give our students new material from up and coming shows, from recent shows. We don't know how to access those, or even just unique material. And so I will send them to Audition Source, or many of them have hired me to create playlists for them to help them. Like I have one for theater ensemble songs because they needed pieces that they could do with a whole class of MT students, or duets, trios, quartets, and rare solo show tunes. And I recognize that those people found you and found me because they are theater professors who are social media savvy, and that's not where everybody's at. And there will always be people who are on a social media cleanse, who never really picked that up, who are not of that generation. And that's why I'm like, oh, I would love to have somewhere that's centralized, that lists these things out clearly, but I don't know how to build a website. I don't know how you built yours. It's beautiful. But it might be something that I have to pick up. I might just have to learn how.
I think that's one of the things as well, is that all of us have certain gaps in terms of what we were able to do. So from my perspective, as somebody who is older than the other people on the panel here, in terms of social media, I have just about mastered Instagram. And that's as far as I go. And when my students are talking about what I like to call the TikTok, and I know that's a way to communicate with people, but actually I don't know how that works, and I struggle to find how that works, and I don't think it's part of my skill set. And so that's actually, I think, one of the questions I'd like to ask you a bit, and maybe we'll come on to this when we've got time for questions and answers later, but I'd love to know where you would like to see these resources. Where would you like to be able to access these resources? And that might give us some more ideas about how we promote what we're doing. But I wanted to kind of think a little bit more about this idea of gaps and limitations. And so the next question that I have is, what are the limitations of the lists that we have? And where are the gaps in our lists and databases? So does anyone want to start off with that? Go on, Sydney, that's great, thank you.
I mentioned earlier, like, okay, what if I leave the city? That's going to be a problem. I do have a game plan. Like, if I were to book like a tour or something like that, I would access review every venue that I go to and be like, this is what the accessibility in this venue looks like. But I would still be missing everything that's on Broadway, and off Broadway, but also vice versa, right? Like, I'm pretty New York City focused, so I'm not able to make access reviews for stuff that is around the country. Some things that are now on national tour, I reviewed when they were on Broadway, and I know people are using those access reviews for other venues around the country. But that's like obviously an issue. But also like it is very dependent on what shows I want to go see. There are some things where I have heard through the grapevine, the content warnings are so heavy, I'm not going. And other people might not know that until they show up at the show, but I'm not giving an access review. I don't review things that I haven't seen, obviously. So that can be an issue for people who don't know that those things exist. Also because a lot of shows don't put their content warnings on the ticketing website. It's just on the main website, which is a problem that I'm having some conversations with folks about to try to get fixed. Because like I bought a ticket for something and then showed up and then left very upset and been like, well, that you could have told me. Like there's a need for a heads up on that. So that's an issue. That it's like just myself that's doing these things. And also for like my disability theater stuff that I'm working on, I am not actually, I didn't do theater for a lot of my life. I was one of those theater kids who knew like 5 musicals and was obsessed with them and never like branched out beyond that. So people will message me and say, hey, this musical has disability in it. You should look into it. But like, I don't actually know off the top of my head which ones I should be looking at. And so sometimes, like Floyd Collins, for example, I showed up to see the show because I just wanted to. And then there was a disabled character. And I was like, hello, this has been on Broadway for like a month. Nobody told me. I want to do an analysis of this. So I had to do a very quick analysis to make that information available that if I hadn't seen the show, I otherwise would not have known existed. And so, like, that is a huge gap because we're not really having those conversations all that much. And also, the things that end up on my database are things that I'm analyzing in great depth, which I have a list that is longer than what I've already made. So they're also people aren't knowing that they're on my list because they're not on my channel yet. So it's also going to take a couple of years for me to get through everything I intend to get through. And so it's not there's a lot of holes and a lot of gaps in a lot of places. And I'm also acknowledging that like the more that I do performing, the more I'm not going to have as much time to be doing all of these access reviews and all of this in-depth research where I'm in the archives for a really long time and all this kind of stuff is just not going to be possible. And so I'm like trying to speed run as much as I can now in case something happens and I'm no longer able to do it. But it's a very difficult situation for me to be in.
Absolutely. And I think actually most of us would say the same thing, is that the lists that we have at the moment are mostly updated and maintained by us as individuals. And that's definitely something which I guess limits what we can do with the list that we have. Did anyone else want to come in here? Yeah, go on, Caden.
So I'm Chicago based, which means that I really don't have access to a lot of the shows that people want to know about until reviews come out, if they have enough of a plot description, which they often don't, until an album comes out, which is a huge help, until the Wikipedia finally adds the huge plot paragraphs that I can read through as I listen to the albums or whatever. And then I can sort of input that information into the map of musicals, into the timeline of musicals, into my list of child-friendly musicals, which I'm was commissioned by a choreographer who wants to every semester bring in something that's child-friendly for her students that also exposes them to some new art. And it's hard because I don't have access to the script and I don't have access to see the show. So sometimes I have to make an educated guess about whether a show is or is not child friendly and add that information. And I think time is a huge limiting factor, but also yes, I get collaboration help somewhat from my comment section. I have all of my spreadsheets open, offers for things, but often people give me just entirely wrong information that they think that they know about a show, and I have to take the time to get the offer, go and fact check it, because this isn't a person I know in real life, and nor can vet their knowledge, and then go back and input it. And it's just really time consuming, especially because I can't stop myself from making more lists.
I think that's one of the things as well, is that the accessibility of the material can be quite difficult. And if I'm talking from my own list of musicals with LGBTQ plus characters, I have a rule with that website that I generally will only put something on the list if there is something for people to go and look at to do with that musical. So whether it's a cast album or whether it's a trailer or whatever it is, because if I just put something onto that list and there's no information about, there's nowhere for people to look at it, I don't really know what necessarily the purpose of that would be. And so actually being able to get hold of scripts or performances or whatever it is, and this goes back to things that I've been saying in the paper I gave this morning as well, is that it's very difficult to find, if something has only run for a couple of weeks at a fringe theatre and I haven't gone to see it, it's very difficult to find any information about that musical. And so for me, that would be the major, alongside what Caden and Sydney have already said, that would be the major limitation with the work that I'm doing at the moment. Jordan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, just echoing a lot of similar sentiments from everyone here. It sounds like we're all in similar boats where these are, essentially personal passion projects, and we are trying to branch them out and fill in those gaps where we can, and we're trying to moderate the content that also comes in from general public when it does. Something that I thought of that might help for yours, Caden, actually, off the top of my head that you mentioned, I created a Google form that goes to a separate sheet from the one that's connected to the app. So I'm able to actually moderate and vet things as they come in before they go onto the public sheet. That might be something you could also consider doing for yours. But other than that, yeah, it's figuring out how to have that kind of that community maintained platform, especially for all of us, because we're all also working professionals. We have lives, we have jobs, we have other things that we want to do, but we also want to do these. And so where can we ease those burdens is a great question that I am also looking for the answers for. In terms of other gaps in the database that I have on Audition Source right now, I really want to somehow integrate some of the information from the lists that you all are building, but also I'm really interested in adding monologues and pop music in general, because that's also an area where like a lot of shows are asking like a rock or pop song or like contemporary music rather than like musical theater show tunes. And so those are not my areas of expertise. I'm not a monologue guy or a pop music knowledgeable. So those are things that I'm like, oh, I need to find a person who is just as nerdy as I am about monologues that I am about show tunes.
I think that's a really important point there, actually, and it kind of leads me on to the next question I want to ask. I'm also, just to warn everybody in the room, we're going to be opening the floor to questions shortly, and I'd love within those questions for you to have a think about how the academic community, being as this is an academic conference, how the academic community, how your students and other musical theatre communities might be able to support the sort of work that we are doing. But I'm just going to ask the panel as a final question from me to think about. So we've talked a lot about the fact that we are doing this work as individuals, and there is a thing about how we collaborate with other people. And I've got 2 points that I'm going to make to start off with this. One is, don't do what I did, which is to set up a contact form on the website that links to to an email address that you don't check, because I I checked it about 2 weeks ago before I came here and had messages from the last 2 years giving me things to add to the list. So we do have to be careful to make sure that those sort of things actually work. But what I was thinking about, the big question I'm thinking is, and I think we've already alluded to this, is that when we collaborate, when we give this work to other people, or we ask other people to support what we're doing, there's 2 questions for me there. One is, how do we get those people to be able to access whatever our list is to update? And secondly, how do we, this sounds a horrible phrase, but how do we quality check the information that we're giving, that we're being given? So that's sort of the question that I have here is, how can we develop our list through these collaborations, and what consequences might there be if we open things to collaborators? So does anyone have any thoughts? Does anyone want to start off with that? Yeah, go on, Sydney.
I'm also kind of piggybacking off of something that Caden said earlier about people just giving straight up false information. I both in with my theater work and with my like other media reviews that I do, nobody has a full understanding of what autistic coding means. And so when I am doing my like reviewing of autistic characters, I usually have to pick at this point, because of how many requests I have, about twice as many things as I need to review for that month, because half of them will not be autistic coding. And I won't know that until I've watched the whole movie, and I'll be like, well, that wasn't that. And so it's really difficult, because I like, another issue where this came up was a lot of people when the Tommy revival appeared, being like, "Oh, it's a deaf character," and I was like, "No, he's not. Like, he is not at all in any way. He has like catatonia and some other, like, it's a complicated conversation." But like, there is this willingness to be like, "Oh, I think this is what this character has because I personally like connect to it, so they must be autistic coded." And I'm like, that's there is an academic definition of autistic coding, which is different from, I as an autistic person see myself in this character. And so I come up with a lot of issues with things to analyze, because I will put a lot of work into analyzing something and then realize I can't use it. And that's really frustrating and makes it hard after a while to want to keep putting in all of that work, because I'm like, I put in so much work for this and I can't use it because it's not actually in this topic. And I think like with my accessibility reviews, I've had conversations of like, okay, like if I were to go on a tour, would I pass this off to somebody so that these things can still exist? But like, I have a very specific, this is what I mean when I say this feels stroby. This is what I mean when I say it doesn't feel stroby. This is the kind of lighting that I will note and the kind of lighting that I won't note, that I've like refined over the last 2 years and has changed a lot over time. And so I don't know, like, if I gave it off to somebody else, if I would trust what review they had to offer, because I don't know. I like that mine is sort of standardized across all of the ones that I have. You kind of know what to expect. And I've also seen, I don't know, 70 shows at this point that I've reviewed. And so I can compare them very easily in a way that somebody else wouldn't. And so it's hard, because I know that I can't do all this myself. I know that I am constrained by time and eventually probably by location at some points. And I want to be able to make this more universal and more accessible. And I think at the very least, people talking about strobes being in shows is more common now. Content warnings are getting more common, so that's less of a concern. But I still am finding like I want to crowdsource. Crowdsourcing is taking me more time and energy than it's worth, so it's not actually worth doing that. And just kind of keeping things as they are, even if that's not necessarily the most productive thing, because it feels the most productive, if that makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense. Thank you, Sydney, for that. Does anyone want to chime in next? I mean, I can talk from the point of view of the website, which is that I would absolutely love other people to be involved in putting things, suggesting things to go on the website. In some ways, what I have on the website is quite straightforward in that it's the basic information about the musical, and then links to Spotify, YouTube, something like that. And at the moment, that's the only information that's on the website. Where the problem comes for me is that at the moment, the only person that can edit the website is me. And so people send things through to me, as they've been doing apparently for the last 2 years. And it relies on me having the time and being in the right brain space to be able to go onto the website and to update it. And so that's the sort of question that I'm looking for. It's not so much that I worry about who I collaborate with. And actually, you know, I think students and academics, you know, you probably all know musicals that should be on my list that aren't on there. But it's more as a kind of practical thing about how is the website the best way to keep this list? Would this list be better as a wiki? All of those sort of things. But that's not my area. And so it's trying to find collaborators, not just who can add to the list, but also collaborators who can help me technically with the format that the list is taking. Yeah, go on, Caden.
I'm also kind of thinking about like I can ask for help more often because I know that there are other people who collect the information that I collect. I know that there are other people who collect the information that Jordan collects. I think Sydney's a little bit different because you are like an expert in like this very particular thing. And I think that there are people who can make like access guides, but you are catering to a very specific group of experiences. And so I'm like, well, I think somebody should fund you and like get and people should be hiring you to be a consultant in their theaters and stuff like that. That's like a whole other thing. It's just that I think what we need is to find people like the people at this conference and say like, I'm sure y'all know some people who like collect lots of audition songs and have them broken down by what vocal type they are, and who can provide that, who would be willing to provide that information to Jordan, who would be willing to find their friend who has a list of queer musicals or like a library of monologues that they could then like connect with you or connect with Jordan or connect with me and just be like, hey, let's meet, let's actually get a sense of like who each other are and your knowledge so that we can get past that. I don't know you and you're submitting stuff through my website's request section. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean with that. Yeah. And I was thinking as well in terms of us, actually a lot of the stuff we're talking about, yes, we're talking very specifically about lists, but those of us who are academics, actually so much of this stuff applies to our own research projects and how we collaborate within our research projects and how we find other people. Because in academia, things very often have been, it's just us. We are working individually on this project. It's going to be our name that goes forward to the ref or whatever whatever the research standardization thing is or the research quality thing is that our colleges and universities are set up to. And so I think actually these questions that we're asking here are relevant to us as academics as well. Jordan, I was just going to give you a chance to answer that question, and then I'll hand this over to questions from the audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like everyone kind of touched on similar things that I'd wanted to bring up, you know, working with the academic community, particularly in the area of college auditions. I know I've seen a guy on TikTok who is like, I went to the like college auditions festival, and these were the top like audition songs that I saw. I think there are people that are kind of doing similar things that we are already doing that we can collaborate with. And then also, I'm not sure, what the regulatory nature is within, like, from the casting director's side at auditions and EPAs, for instance, but I'm sure they have some kind of system where they either are writing down what audition material was brought in before them in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they don't. It might depend. I know one group as well that has done something similar that I had also like utilized because they offered when I asked was what is the name of the group? Theater something. I can't remember. Very specific, I know. But they had a general audition for a group of theaters, and people had to like sign up with what audition materials they were doing in advance, and they kept that list, and you could just look at the list. And I think if they were to digitize that information rather than having to like take pictures
I think we've just lost you, Jordan. Just
of it and then go in and manually type. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, if you just
Okay. Just it would be great if that information could be digitized and shared, is the main kind of thing I was trying to get at. But yeah, there's a lot of data in areas that I just don't think we're utilizing, and there's a lot of value there that can be spread.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Jordan. So I'm going to come to the audience now, and I just wanted to summarize some of the things we've spoken about, which maybe will help with you formulating your questions and comments. So one of the things we spoke about early on in this panel was we were thinking a little bit about how to make the resources more publicly available, and whether there are places that you would like to be able to go to find these lists, or what would be the easiest way for you to know about these things. That's a question that would be interesting to hear some answers to. Also thinking about the limitations and the gaps and the ideas of collaboration, and particularly collaboration in academia and with students. Again, those sorts of things would be really interesting to hear from you about as well. And then if there's any questions that you have for any of us, we've got Sydney here who has been working on accessibility reports for shows. Caden has many spreadsheets and databases about the sort of representations across shows, among other things. And Jordan here has a list of audition songs, again, amongst other things as well. And if you want to ask any of us any questions about our work or anything like that, then that would be great as well. So if anyone has any questions, Jordan, sorry.
I remembered the name of the group, Theater Resources Unlimited.
Theatre Resources Unlimited. That's great. Thank you. So do we have any questions? I'm going to come around now because I'm the sporty one. Does anyone have any questions at all? Or thoughts or answers or to the questions that I've suggested?
I'm especially curious as to where you would like to find information when it's in a way that's not just like find it on TikTok,
Yeah, I'm going to pass the microphone. If you speak straight into it, that would be great.
Hi. Well, I'm glad that Caden eventually brought up the issue of money, because I've just been sitting here thinking the whole time that this is, you're all doing this for free. Like, this is like free labor, and it is labor, like it is work. And I know I love the like crowdsourcing element of it and the sort of democratization of this information. But I guess I'm the cynic that's like, well, some of these some resources and databases of other kinds that we're used to in academia are behind a paywall, or like the institution subscribes to this resource and you have to pay to subscribe to it. But I'm torn because I think people should have access to this information for free, and yet it needs to be funded somewhere. So I guess in the question of like, can institutions, it feels like a, you know, an academic at an institution could set up a center and have grad students or whatever working on maintaining these databases rather than single-handedly trying to maintain something. But it would take an institution with the resources to actually put toward this. Like, yeah, the money question is just what's looming for me.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that. Does anyone, I can give an answer to that to start off with, and then if anyone wants to chip in there. So I'm slightly different to the others in the fact that I work in academia. And so actually, it doesn't go anywhere near the number of hours I spend on this, but I can put my research hours towards maintaining the website. And I have also used the website in a lot of bids, funding bids from things like the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK, the British Academy project I'm working on at the moment. And that gives me some support in being able to do things. I mean, the other thing that I have is a podcast where I talk to practitioners from the UK, US, Australia, and we talk about how their work is represented and how their identities are represented, and that is funded usually through making bids. So one of the things as academics we can do is we can use our research bids, our research money, and hopefully engage some of these people as consultants on the projects. I don't know if you have any thoughts. So the question is about how the work is funded, I think.
I mean, for me specifically, like I'm a working dramaturg and working disability like historian, so I am sort of concurrently getting paid for this stuff when I work on specific shows, and also like it'd be nice to be paid to do everything else, but I am, at least some of this work is being paid, and I'm tentatively have some other things in the works that would pay for even more of this. So I like am aware of that, but I'm still also, it's not just, oh, I'm creating this database and it's available for everybody for free, but also I'm paying my own money to see every single one of these shows. So like I'm using TDF and I'm using you know, the equity cheap tickets, and I'm using like everything that's available to me to try to get into these spaces for as cheaply as humanly possible. And sometimes I am given comps if I know somebody in the show and they want me to make one, but that's pretty rare at this point. So it's hard because I'm actively, it's not just like, oh, this is taking up time, but I'm actively spending money on choosing to do this. And so that's difficult. But I do at least am using this expertise also for things that get me money, which is nice to at least feel like I'm getting something off of it.
Thanks for that, Sydney. Did anyone else want to comment on that at all?
I know I brought this project that I've been working on in grad school to my professors as basically, it was my capstone project, which is kind of like a thesis in a sense. And I remember some of the things that they recommended to me when it came to seeking funding was applying for things like fiscal sponsorships or grants. But not all of those are going to be like a long term, but they can get kind of the ball rolling. Things that I've considered aside from like larger funding is I also want to make sure that the website as a whole, the database, is free to use and free to look at. And so I've been very kind of averse to locking it behind a paywall, as the person who asked the question. And I know there is possibly the potential for making it freemium, in a sense, like Pandora. You have the free version, anybody can listen to Pandora, but if you want to like pay to skip ads or things like that, then you can do the subscription fee. That could be another way to supplement the website in terms of funding. Another thing I was considering in a conjunction with that is like, what are some additional features that could be behind a paywall that would just be like that extra thing that I can't get into right now, but hopefully could be something to introduce to the website. But when it came to like searching for, I don't know, even where to apply for, it feels like what we're doing is so niche. Like I don't know if I'm applying for a theater grant, but in most of the cases, it's going to be for a production of some kind. And then, yeah, I'm not sure where to navigate to find the places that would be interested in the kind of things that we're doing. So it's a great question that I'm passing along to other people in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think, again, those of us that have academic positions, if we are using some of these resources as part of a research project, so for example, if we're doing a research project about the use of particular songs in auditions or certain things for certain voice types, again, that might be the opportunity for us to be looking for research associates. And again, these people might be the right sort of people to ask. Caden, did you want to say anything on that, or shall I move on? Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions or observations at all from people? Again, I'm especially thinking about this question of where we should put these resources so that you can access them. Can you just check that? There's only the 4 of us on it, so I don't think there's.
Oh yes, these are comments from Jordan about like this was before we started the panel. This woman was saying like, oh, somebody asked a question on Zoom, and we were like, oh, we don't have any people viewing on Zoom.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. Thank you. Anything else from anybody at all? I really do appreciate you coming to this panel. I realize this is a slightly unusual thing for us to do at a conference, but to me, it's really important that we're involving people who are researching outside of academies and really valuing the research that people are doing. And hopefully, if you do have any ideas or any thoughts about how we can make all of this work more accessible, then that would be really great. The other thing is that we are hoping to make this recording public on YouTube. And if anyone has said anything or asked any questions or anything like that, and you would like us to edit them out, please let us know. But the thing that we'd like to do is to put this online so that we can then ask those questions to other people. And again, we will hopefully be able to pass this through ISSM or through the conference and send this through to other people as well. And if you could share this with any people, these resources with any people that you have access to, any communities that you work with, we'd be really grateful. And hopefully, and certainly from an academic point of view, my work in the future is looking at building these sorts of resources in all sorts of different areas. And it would be great to get more people involved in that as we go through. So I think we'll finish there, if that's okay. Thank you very much. I believe it is now lunchtime. I think I've got that right. Thank you very much for coming. And thank you very much to all of our panelists. And
thank you, everyone.
Have a lovely lunchtime, and we will see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.
Great to see you.